Ever notice that like split-second wobble a bell makes right after you ring it before it settles into that clear tone?
Oh, yeah.
That, my friend, is a transient in action. And today we're diving deep into that hidden world using the one and only Feynman lectures as our guide.
Ah, Feynman. Always a wild ride.
Right. Dense as a neutron star. But trust me, we're going to distill those mind-bending lectures into something you can actually use, like cocktail party ready physics knowledge.
Think of it like we're giving you the cheat sheet to sounding brilliant without all the equation waiting.
Exactly. So transients. They happen anytime a system gets knocked off balance, like our bell, and has to find its equilibrium again. And you know me, I love a good real-world connection. Imagine a kid on a swing set, right, being
Perfect.
pushed.
Forced oscillation.
Boom, we're pumping energy into the
Wow.
system. Now, Feynman, being Feynman, he's got equations for this whole energy exchange thing. Want to unpack those for us a bit?
Okay, so imagine that kid at the peak of their swing,
We're
right?
full of potential energy, about to come flying down.
Exactly. Like a stretched spring, just itching to unleash. And as they swing down, that potential energy morphs into kinetic energy, the energy of motion. It's this constant dance between the two, potential to kinetic, back and forth.
Okay, I'm picturing it, but then why doesn't the swing just keep going forever? We know it eventually winds down. What's the physics behind that?
Ah, that's where our old friend friction comes in, which you'll see Feynman represents with the Greek letter gamma in his
Oop.
equations, the party pooper, draining the fun out of the oscillation.
So in the swing example, that's like what? Air resistance, the squeaky hinges,
Exactly. All those little things that steal a tiny bit of energy with each swing.
which is why playground equipment needs regular oiling, huh? Fighting that energy drain. You know, this makes me think about like my phone. When someone calls and it vibrates, it eventually stops, right? Is that because of this energy loss too?
Precisely. And that's where this idea of the Q factor comes in, which Feynman introduces. It's basically a measure of how efficient an oscillator is. Like a high Q factor means it can store a lot of energy compared to how much it loses each cycle.
So a high Q swing would be like a perpetual motion machine. Sign me up for that. But seriously, what does a high Q even mean in the real world?
Think about a bell.
Hmm.
One with a high Q factor is going to ring longer and clearer, right? While a low Q one, it's more like a thud.
Huh. So it's like the quality of the sound is directly tied to this Q thing.
Exactly. Same with your phone, higher Q, longer vibration.
Wow, so this seemingly abstract Q factor is dictating how the world sounds to us. That's way cooler than I expected.
And it gets even more interesting when we start visualizing these concepts with something familiar, electrical circuits.
Hold on, you're telling me we can actually see these oscillations and how they decay in an electrical circuit. Now that's intriguing. Tell me more. It's like we're translating this invisible world of energy and oscillations into something we can actually see happening.
Exactly. And Feynman uses a really simple electrical circuit as an example. You can find it in figure 24-2 of the lectures. Basically, imagine giving this circuit a quick jolt of voltage, like zap, a tiny lightning strike. What we're interested in is the aftermath, how the electrical current and the voltage in the circuit behave after that initial zap.
So it's like poking the circuit and then watching how it reacts.
You got it. Now, here's where things get cool. Each part of this circuit, the inductor, the resistor, the capacitor, they actually mirror the elements we've been talking about, like in our swing example.
Oh, okay. So tell me about that. How do these electrical components map onto our swing set analogy?
All right, so let's start with the inductor, usually represented by the letter L. This is like the mass in our swing or the weight of a bell, all about storing that initial potential energy.
So the inductor is like that split second where the swing is at its highest point, full of potential.
Exactly. And then you've got the resistor, represented by R, that acts like R friction, R damping. Remember gamma?
The energy vampire.
Exactly. It's the component that's slowly stealing energy away from the system, causing those oscillations to die down.
Okay, got it. So inductor is storing energy, resistor is slowly releasing it. What about that springy, bouncy effect? What's the electrical version of that?
That's where the capacitor comes in, often represented by C. Just like a spring tries to bounce back to its original shape, the capacitor acts as the restoring force, always trying to bring the system back to equilibrium.
Okay, so we've got our inductor for storing, resistor for releasing, capacitor for restoring. And the cool part is we can see all of this happening on an oscilloscope, right? Watch those components create those transient oscillations.
Exactly, like a physics light show, those waves dancing across the screen. But here's where it gets really wild by just tweaking one thing, like the resistance.
Yeah.
We can totally change the behavior of the whole system.
Now you're speaking my language. I love a good visual. Didn't Feynman include some diagrams about this? Something about like cranking up the resistance?
Absolutely. Figures 24.3 through 24.6, he shows us exactly what happens as we increase the resistance. It's like adding more and more friction to our swing set.
Oh, I like where this is going. All right, listeners, let's walk through these visuals step by step, starting with low resistance. What are we seeing here?
Okay, so picture this. On the oscilloscope, with low resistance, you get these beautiful, classic oscillations. The energy is bouncing back and forth between that inductor and capacitor. And just like a high Q swing, it takes a long time for those oscillations to fade away.
So our Energizer bunny swing just keeps going and going. What happens as we start to increase the resistance, though? Do the oscillations get a little tired?
Exactly. It's like throwing on the brakes. In figure 24-4, you see those oscillations shrinking, decaying much faster because the resistor is gobbling up more of that energy.
Higher resistance, faster fade out. It's like adding molasses to the swing set. What happens when we really crank it up, though? Max out the resistance. What does our physics light show look like then?
That's where things get really interesting. In figure 24-5, those oscillations are faint, barely even there. And then, with very high resistance, something almost magical happens.
Don't leave me hanging. What happens? Do the oscillations just give up?
In a way, yeah. We transition from that back and forth oscillatory world into what we call exponential decay. Instead of gradually winding down, it's like, boom, almost instantaneous drop to equilibrium. Someone hit the off switch.
Whoa, so instead of gently rocking to a stop, our swing just goes thud. No more back and forth, just done.
Exactly. And what Feynman wants us to see is this isn't just some weird thing that happens in circuits. This rapid decay, this sudden stop, it happens all over the place in the real world.
Okay, hit me with some real-world examples. I'm ready to see exponential decay lurking around every corner now.
Think about the clock on your microwave. You open the door, those glowing digits, they don't linger. They're gone instantly.
Oh, true. Or like a car slamming on its brakes, even a big, heavy one comes to a stop surprisingly fast.
Exactly. It's everywhere once you start to notice it.
Suddenly, I'm seeing exponential decay all over the place. It's like a secret code suddenly revealed. But Feynman being Feynman, he doesn't just show us the what, he gives us the how too, right? Yeah. The equations to predict the exact shape of that decay curve, like he's handing us the keys to the kingdom.
He does. And it all comes down to those initial conditions, the X naught and V naught. They tell us exactly how the system gets pushed, its starting position and its initial speed.
So it's like, say, it's not just that you pushed the swing, but also how hard you pushed it and where the swing was when you did it.
Exactly.
Okay, so last time we were talking about those initial conditions, the infamous X naught and V naught, and I feel like there's got to be more to it than just like Feynman throwing in some extra letters to keep us on our toes.
You're right to think that. Remember, we keep talking about systems getting pushed, pulled, zapped.
Poked, prodded.
Exactly. Those initial conditions, that X naught and V naught, they tell us exactly how the system is pushed, like its starting position and its initial speed all wrapped up into one.
So it's like saying it's not just that you pushed the swing, but also like how hard you pushed it and where the swing was when you did it.
Now you're getting it. Think about our swing set again. If you give it a gentle nudge from resting, it's going to be way different than yanking it back and letting it fly.
Totally. Gentle sway versus screaming kid at the playground energy. So how do those initial conditions actually play out in the equations Feynman gives us?
It's like this. Those conditions, they determine the whole personality of the decay curve, whether it's going to be a slow, graceful fade out or just nosedive right to equilibrium.
Okay, so it's like those initial conditions are setting the stage for the whole drama, like the opening scene that sets the tone for the whole movie.
That's a great way to put it. And what's so cool about the equations Feynman gives us, even though we're not like doing the math out here,
Yeah.
is that you can plug in any combination of those initial conditions and it'll predict the exact shape of the decay, like a physics simulator.
So no more hand-wavy, oh, it'll stop eventually. We can pinpoint when and how that stop happens just by knowing where it started and how fast it was going at the beginning.
Exactly.
That's wild. But you know me, gotta bring it back to reality. Why does this matter? Why should we care about predicting these curves so precisely? What's the practical use?
Imagine you're designing something like a high-performance car, right? Knowing those initial conditions, how they affect braking.
Oh, okay, suddenly high stakes.
Right, that's the difference between a smooth stop and disaster. Understanding how that decay happens is crucial.
So it's not just theoretical, it gets very real very quickly. All right, as we wrap up here, What's the key thing you want listeners to walk away with? What's the heart of this whole transient journey?
That the world is full of oscillations. Bridges swaying, signals in your phone, it's all around us.
Hmm.
And by understanding energy, damping, and yes, those initial conditions, we can make sense of these hidden patterns, predict how things will behave, and honestly design a better future because of it.
Feynman would be proud. We took dense equations and made them, dare I say, kind of cool. So, listeners, next time you hear an echo fading or watch your coffee sloshing in its mug, remember there's a whole lot of physics going on behind the scenes. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Catch you next time.